I've talked about this so many times. It's not about who already has the largest market share. It's who's taking the most market share at the most rapid rate. So I'm more interested in growth than I am in what's already in existence.
Right.
That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck.
Yeah, so you can invest in these small companies that are, they're only gaining small percentage of the mix, but from their perspective, these companies might have doubled or tripled or 10x their sales because because they're gaining that share. So
Right.
if you can get in early before that goes up, it's going to be huge. All right, welcome to the Angel Research Podcast. My name is Jason Freert. I'm here with Jeff Siegel, managing editor and founder of Green Chip Stocks. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, sir. I have to say I'm co-founder. Brian Hicks was the
Okay.
other co-founder.
You're giving him credit on that?
I mean, if it wasn't for him, it wouldn't exist,
True. And it's been a bit since you've been on, so we got a bunch of stuff to cover. But I think the first thing we were talking about before this was Trump came out and said he's not going to let a central bank digital currency happen. I guess because Vivek Ramaswamy got in his ear and on his endorsement, and he said he's not going to do it. It didn't sound like he even knew what it was.
He didn't know what it was.
But he was like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to. And people were like, yeah. And he's like, oh, you guys know about that? So it seemed like he just learned about it. But overall, if he's against it, that sounds like at least a good thing if he becomes president again.
I feel like typically if he was against something, I'd probably be for it. But in this case, I have to agree with him, even though if he doesn't know what it is.
Right.
And for those who don't know, Central Bank Digital Currency, we just refer to it as CBDC.
Right.
And I am absolutely opposed to it for so many reasons. Just that the whole idea is that all your money is going to be controlled essentially by a government-run algorithm.
Right.
I mean, that's what it boils down to. So one of the things I've talked about in the past is the idea of you have a CBDC in place. There's a certain level of control over your money at that point. So anything can happen. So let's say, for example, you want to invest in a psychedelics company. Okay. Well, maybe whoever is a president at the time, or maybe there's some other politician that doesn't like psychedelics and sees that you want to invest $5,000 into a psychedelics company. Well, under a CBDC scenario, it could be flagged, because maybe it's because it's discussing psychedelics. It gets flagged, and they say, no, you can't invest in that company with your CBDC, and if you try, we'll just turn it off.
Right.
We'll just turn your money off.
Yeah. And they, it's not like they don't. Some of that power they already sort of have. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're giving them additional power in that regard. And a lot of people are like, oh, this is conspiracy stuff. But two things on that point. One, it's another country, but Canada basically did that with that Canadian trucker protest, I guess. They basically froze people's bank accounts who were like donating money to the truckers to like,
right.
and like they were sending them so they could like buy food like while they were like doing their thing, and they basically just like shut it down.
Yeah.
Two, it was recently came out, I guess, that the FBI was during the January 6th investigation. They basically were looking into people that had like done, I don't know, Venmo transfers and had like MAGA in the like thing right. And like trying to tie them. So it's like it's already there.
Right.
Them potentially to use, the ultimate form of weaponry is the monetary, right?
Well, okay, so I'm going to show you something. Let's
look
you
brought
at this.
A prop?
Yeah, I brought props. Just decided. Okay, so Jason, say I want to give you $20. Say you bought me some weed and I need to pay you back. So I give you $20. Here's $20. You take it. I get my weed. That's that.
Yeah.
Under a CBDC scenario, the government could be like, no,
Yeah.
I don't want you to be able to use that money for that. They can't. This is like in real life. Like I can give you this $20. They can't unless they barge in here and take it.
Right.
You know, they can't stop the transaction. But under a CBDC scenario, not only can they stop it, they can stop it within a millisecond.
Right.
You know, there is an algorithm in place that'll say, hey, no, they're not allowed to do this.
Yeah.
They're saying you're not allowed to do what you want to do with your money.
Yeah.
And maybe it's illegal, but maybe it's not either. Quite a few things would not necessarily be illegal at all. You know, we talk about the social credit system they had in China. Well, what if the same thing happens here? Well, you didn't get your vaccine. No.
Yeah.
We're going to cut your money off.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think when people talk about the idea of that they're like, oh, that's a Chinese authoritarian like socialist thing that wouldn't happen here. But it's like it happens in like more subversive like ways, right? It's like first it was like you said, they mentioned the vaccine stuff. They're like, oh, when they wanted people to do that, they're like, oh, let's like threaten their job basically.
Yeah.
You know, to do that. And so, you know, that was an extreme scenario, but the government has certain tools at their disposal that they'll use. They'll say they won't use it unless it's an emergency.
Right.
And then, you know.
And then all of a sudden there's an emergency.
Right.
You know?
Okay, we're not going to. And like we've said multiple times in the past, when government has a certain level of power, they're like, why would they give it back? Like,
well, exactly.
They just don't.
Yeah. After 9/11, all of a sudden everything was under surveillance.
Yeah.
Right. And American citizens lost constitutional rights because there was an emergency and we were attacked. So this is in your best interest. You know, if I say this stuff, sometimes people will just assume like, oh, you're just being conspiratorial. When has the government ever done anything in your best interest?
Right.
Ever. It's like, how many times do you have to look at situations where the state has stolen from you, whether, you know, through taxation or, you know, subsidization of different industries that comes out of your pocket, you know, all the wars that we get into that directly affect us. We were talking about Dave Smith earlier, and he was talking about.
Oh yeah, he said if we had to levy a personal tax on each U.S. citizen to fund the wars, like, and it actually showed like a line item on your pay stub, people would be like, no, fuck this. What are you talking? Oh, wait, you want to use my money? But essentially, people, that's what's happening, and it's sort of through inflation and, you know, money printing and all that kind of stuff that people don't realize it. They don't, you know, that's the thing with like COVID. They don't realize like all that fiscal stimulus that gave us the inflation, like at the time, it was like, oh, great, yeah, like I got this money, yeah, we need this, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, a couple of years later, they're like, wait, that wasn't a good idea, you know. And then meanwhile, like the people that made the decision they're not even in power anymore, or they've made their money and now they're off, you know, consulting or lobbying from somebody else. And then it's just like, and then the new guy comes in and is like, oh yeah, let's blame that guy. We're not going to do it. And then they end up fucking doing it again. Too.
Right.
So,
yeah, I just do not like the idea of CBDC at all. And I've actually done some research to trying to figure out, okay, is there a way that we can protect our wealth and our freedom from this? And I have found nothing, you know?
Yeah, well, it's not there yet. You know, cash, so just having a certain amount of cash on hand, I think. But the problem with that, as we talked before, is there's more and more places that are like, we don't accept cash. Mm-hmm. Like, it's convenience. Like, COVID really kickstarted it. It was like, oh, no, like, if you touch that money, it's going to have COVID on it. So don't give me that COVID money. So we're only doing, which is crazy because a lot of cash-only places, like, they do that because then they don't have to pay the credit card fees. And so they were like magically like, oh yeah, we're going to do this. It's like, and they, you know, were paying 2-3 however % to the credit card companies. And they were like cool with it because, and I know the workers that worked at that place, they're like, yeah, I don't want to have to deal with cash. Yeah, just tap your thing there. Right. They don't have to do any math or give you change or anything. So most of the time it was there. And then business was actually increasing to some of these places that were still open, that they're like, okay, yeah, great. Like, I don't want to have to deal with cash. And then they're like, oh, we're not going to go back. And then slowly, it's just this sort of like, oh, we don't deal with cash. It's just a pain in the butt. And then, you know, now we're never going to go back to cash. And you roll in there with like, you know, $5,000 in cash, and essentially it's worthless because you can't use it to get anything.
Right. Well, so the interesting thing about, because you mentioned cash, and even let's say in the absence of that situation where people don't take cash, under the scenario again of CBDC, say you hoarded all this cash and you have all this cash, like I'm protected. Well, once you spend that cash is going to be converted into CBDC. Right. So then what are you going to do? And I know like a lot of gold bugs will be like, well, this is why I own gold. Yeah. Nobody cares. Do you think first of all, how many people are really going to accept gold as payment?
I mean, you couldn't find somebody, well, I shouldn't say that. It would be out, but if you had like the same amount, that you'd have to overpay for what you know what I mean? Like, hey, I'm going to give you $2,000 worth of gold for a freaking candy bar or whatever. Like, people would take that. But if it was like, hey, you had this small amount, like a gold rings or something, and maybe it's worth like, you know, $100, and you try to barter with that, people are gonna be like, nah, like, what are you talking about? Just give me the cash, or like Venmo me, kind of thing.
Exactly.
And there's no actual physical means of it. So I do agree. I think eventually crypto, certain methods of crypto can solve this. Bitcoin in general is still traceable, right? They still have these on-ramps that you have to do. You still have to connect to a bank, and then have them wire. You know, when I first started buying crypto a while back, places like Coinbase would let you buy crypto on like a credit card, not like a debit card, like a credit card. Like you could buy like, you know, depending on your limit, you could buy like $20,000 on a credit card on crypto. And then like I did it a couple of times because it was like by the time you had to pay that, it had already doubled. So it was just like, yeah, and you get the credit card points, all that kind of stuff. So they stopped doing that, I think, because people were not like, they were just going YOLO into it at the time, and it was driving this mania. But at the end of the day, that's still, you know, you still have to find somebody that's going to transact into it. And but in some of these third world countries where the central banks have gone nuts, Bitcoin is pretty popular. Like, people will get their paycheck and just convert it right into that, because like you said, they can't get their paycheck and just go like convert it into gold. Like, it's just, there's not, you know, it's just easy. You can get the paycheck, maybe it's in a bank account, and then convert it into crypto and hold it in a crypto wallet.
But do you honestly believe that, you know, theoretically, I love the idea of crypto. In practice, I don't buy for 1 second that the government can't control it. It's not going away. It'll always be here, but it will have some influence over it. I mean, how easy is it for a government to go in and manipulate it?
Well, and
steal it.
Yeah, I don't, you know, they can't steal it, but what they can do is make it very difficult to transact into the currency that you want. So you need to go full blown, like once you're on the blockchain, you can't come back out. You know what I mean? And what they can also do is provide a lot of pressure to these things. So even Canada tried to, like, people were using crypto for those truckers, and they tried to like go to the crypto exchanges and be like, you need to stop these people from doing it. And they're like, that's not how crypto works. You know what I mean? You can't stop it.
But look at it like this, though. Think about all the things, I'm not saying it could be any government around the world, China, Russia, the United States, whatever. You know, they do what they want. You know, it would not be out of the realms of possibilities to see maybe there's a mining operator that has all this energy that has like a field of solar panels and natural gas backup and all this stuff, and they're just, you know, they're making all this money from all these different transactions because they have the energy, which is great. But then how easy would it be for someone to come in and be like, I'm just going to tear your shit down?
Yeah, that's
what are you going to do?
Yeah, these points of failure are still in the system. the internet, right? What if they shut down your internet? You know what I
Right.
mean? I mean, you can kind of find a way, but they can make it very difficult at
Yeah.
every turn. And I think a lot of these things have happened, and then they cause the price of something like Bitcoin to really. They could probably tank the price if they, for example, and like China has supposedly done this multiple times, where they essentially ban Bitcoin, like, hey, you're not allowed to do it, and like that. If the U.S. did that, it would tank the price hard, and then like the quote unquote store of value that you have is now lost. So you're still at, like, you kind of have to play the game with that in regards.
I think, well, so we talk about CBDC, we talk about crypto, and when I was trying to think of ways that you can kind of exist in this world and protect your wealth, the only thing I could really come up with is just kind of like a being prepared kind of mentality. So there are things that you will always need, that if you have that now, if you have access to that now, that you don't have to basically buy things.
Right.
So to give you an example, there are some, and obviously you have to have money to do this, but there are some people that are completely off grid, aside from being online. But they have solar panels, they have battery backup, whatever it is that they have. They don't need to rely on supplies of natural gas or propane for their backup generators, because it's all solar and battery. So they don't have to be connected to the electrical grid.
Well,
they can create and store their own energy.
And there's like, Zuckerberg is a big one. Like, people, like, these billionaires are like making like doomsday bunkers now.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
What, like, and those are all like off grid. I mean, we've known people that have done that. Stored gold guns, seeds,
Right.
To grow food and all that kind of stuff.
I don't think the gold matters much, but the guns, the seeds, access to water, access to drinkable water, even like in terms of transportation. So again, I mean, it's, if you have an electric vehicle and you power it from your home with your solar panels, you never have to go to the gas station. You never have to go to a public charger. So you're kind of protected in that way, I guess. Again, it's one of those things. It's like, well, is that how you want to live?
Yeah. Well, we're talking about the ultimate, like, doomsday scenario,
I
too.
know.
Where, in my mind, the only thing that will really matter is guns.
Yeah,
to protect
100%.
yourself.
And
because,
surveillance.
And surveillance, because, you have to... And Brian's talked about this, a community of like-minded people,
Right.
that you have a joint goal of protecting yourself. Because if you can't protect yourself, then people are just going to come take your shit.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the doomsday scenario. To me, we are, you really have to be diversified to the many things that could happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the CBDC, right? You don't want to, take all of your net worth and put it out in cash and store it in your safe. That, you know what I mean? But you want to have some of it, right?
Of course,
you want to have some of it. You probably want to have some of it in gold. You want to have some of it in crypto.
But why gold? That's my thing. Why?
Well, gold, because it's a physical item that is truly, like, off. It's truly offline. So, like, to me, the thing that worries me about just going full-blown crypto is just you have to have an infrastructure of computers and stuff off there. So if gold is, is a scenario where, it's kind of the different degrees. Like, to me, the gold scenario is right before the gun scenario. So whereas crypto, to me, is a more likely scenario that we've seen, because it's, third world countries where they lose their infrastructure for a while. They're still, like, able to transact using things like Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff, but they're not using gold.
I'd rather have gold than guns any day. And again, if everything goes to shit, I don't really know how much how valuable that physical gold is going to be. Now, I understand, using gold as a hedge against inflation, and
Yeah.
you can do that without actually having physical gold. But having physical gold also involves the process of like communicating with other people. If you need to sell it, what do you sell it for? You sell it for dollars, or CBDC, or whatever it may be. But right now, and maybe that'll change eventually, but right now it's like it's all going to go back to dollars.
So you think that an electric vehicle would be a good doomsday vehicle?
Yeah, as long as you can, as long as you
Yeah.
have the ability to charge it
Mhm.
without having to worry about being connected to the grid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Which
you-
isn't difficult. You get one
Yeah.
solar panel and a small battery backup system.
Yeah. And however, you need your battery to last for
You get 10 years. You should
10
get about 10
years.
years out of
Yeah.
it. So what happens after that 10 years, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a gas-powered vehicle. Then you have to find gas for it.
Right.
I guess like a biodiesel truck might be better.
If you want to make biodiesel.
Hey, well,
I mean,
yeah.
I know some farmers
So.
that do, but
All right, well, let's go back to EVs in like the actual society that has yet to collapse. We're not saying that it's not going to collapse. It probably is. But it seems to be, and I just read your Energy and Capital about the Hertz situation.
Right.
So what? Just provide a overview of exactly what happened with that, because I just glanced over it.
So Hertz got a little bit overzealous and wanted to transition a sizable chunk of their fleet to electric vehicles, and they ordered 20,000 of them. And I remember I first read the news I think it was a couple of years ago when they made that announcement. It's like 20,000 is a lot of electric.
Well, I mean, how big is their fleet though?
But then you have to ask yourself the question: how many people do you really? I don't think anyone did the research.
Right.
Like, how many people are really gonna want to rent an EV? I would maybe, because I drive one, but
yeah, it seems like a novelty though.
I totally think it's a novelty for a lot of people. And well, there's a couple problems. One of the problems was the high repair costs. So apparently, a lot of people were wrecking these Teslas.
So these were 20,000 Teslas. It wasn't other, or is it multiple? Was it all Teslas?
You know what? I don't know.
Okay.
I think it may have been all Teslas,
Yeah.
or maybe majority Teslas.
Right. So they were wrecking probably because they didn't know how to.
They
fucking
didn't know how to
it.
drive. Right. So that's what I wrote in the article.
Or were they like the self-driving ones where they were going?
No,
Okay, they were
weren't
just the regular.
self-driving. So one of the things is when you go if you've never driven an electric car, one thing you'll notice right away is the acceleration. So when you step on the accelerator, it just goes. There's no like ramp up that you have with
Right.
an internal combustion vehicle.
Yeah.
So you know.
I've heard it's fun.
Oh, they're fantastic. Yeah, but if you don't know what you're doing and you punch it, then you're going to be 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds or whatever it is.
And there's people who are probably renting it. They're like, oh, and then they take it out. They're like,
Right.
oh, and then psh.
Right. And then again, because you had supply chain constraints, the cost to repair these things are still quite expensive because compared to internal combustion, there's not a lot of the supplies that you need to fix these things. So if something goes wrong, it's like there's only a finite supply of things like materials that you may need to fix it. So many people know how to fix them. You have to go to certain places. So,
Yeah, well, Teslas, don't they still try to like only, is there like, if you crash your Tesla, like Tesla has to fix it for you, right?
No.
There's dealers that
I don't know why you
like
would
repairs.
I don't know why you would go to anyone else because Tesla's kind of like when you buy a Tesla, if something happens to it, typically they'll come get you. So if you're on the side of the road, you just on your screen you just say, the Tesla. I forgot what it's called, but they'll just come get you. And they have the ability to fix these cars pretty easily compared to like Joe's Body Shop who just learned how to fix electric cars.
Right.
So that was an issue. Also, the issue when Elon Musk dropped the price of the Model S's and the Model Ys, the resale value of those vehicles had dropped as well. So like rental car companies, they have them for a while, then they sell them. They sell the cars. So it really affected the resale value.
Okay, so they
paid a
probably
premium.
had a projected resale value on there.
Right.
Yeah, didn't Elon Musk claim that the value of your Tesla was going to go up, though, didn't he claim that a couple of years ago?
A long time ago, yeah. Well, probably at the time it did. Now, because it's a race to the bottom again. Everyone's trying to drop the I mean, that's how
economics works.
Tesla sold a lot more cars last year than initially expected, but they also, couldn't sell them for as much money. So you have to kind of weigh your options. I get it. I know why they're doing it. It's because you want to own the market. And that's the thing too about Tesla. And I think eventually more people understand it's not just about them selling cars. It's about them selling electricity. Because they make money from the fast charging stations. They have the largest charging network in the country.
Well, and a lot of their networks, I guess, are now, or what is the other EV makers are using,
right?
Like, and their sort of charging stations. So what is it? Is there like adapters?
Yeah.
At there for like, I don't know, what's the next most popular electric vehicle out there now that's not a Tesla?
It's probably maybe a Hyundai Ioniq.
Okay.
Or they're not selling a ton of them, but I say they're probably one of the more popular because they've seemed to have the least amount of complaints.
Okay.
Since they've come out. I drove one. It's a nice car.
Okay.
The range is a little less than a Tesla if you look at a Model Y versus an Ioniq, but it's still a decent car for sure. But yeah, there's an adapter. Just like with a Tesla, there's an adapter. You can use a non-Tesla charging station. You just put the adapter on it.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of debate now with EVs. I guess there's this ambitious goal that by 2030 they want to have half of all cars be electric vehicles, and then the government is saying they want their entire government fleet to be electric by, I don't know, like 10 years from now. Like, are any of those realistic?
No. Well, no. So
we were just talking about government incompetence,
right?
And not to trust them.
Shit. I mean, look, all this money is supposed to be spent on these electric charging stations. How many have been built since Biden said we're going to build them? The only electric charging station network that works and is everywhere is Tesla, and that's a company that did that, not a government. So again, show you like if you just let the people, don't let the government do it, just let the companies do it, and it'll work out. But we were talking about with the charging situation. I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about before? The
goals of converting everything to EVs.
So initially, so I look at Bloomberg for their data on this because they've been right more times than anyone else in the IEA or the EIA, and their projections have shown that by 2030, 50% of all new car sales will be electric.
Okay.
I think we were probably on point for that about a year ago. Don't know if that's going to be the situation now. It'll still be considerable though compared to what it is now. I think we're at I want to say 8% penetration now in terms of on the road. But that's the thing is, so you had also a lot of car makers that have pulled back. We're like, we're going to build all these EVs. Now we're not going to build as many now. So the idea that...
Well, the Ford Lightning, they cut their production. Like, is it just the demand isn't what they thought it would be? Or
the demand was really solid when it first came out.
Right.
It's a great truck. The downside on that truck is that it's heavy, so you're not going to get a great range on it. Even like the extended range, which I think is like 300 miles. In the real world, it's not 300 miles. It's especially in the cold weather, it's significantly less. So, and it's just the pricing too, so that you can get a Ford F-150 Lightning with a 200-mile range starting at $50,000. Maybe it was like $52,000 at the time, and then you can get the $7,500 tax credit. Well, Tesla had the Model Y, and then they were able to bring the cost down to I think like $47,000, and you get the tax credit still. So it ends up being cheaper, and for most people, a Model Y makes more sense than a pickup truck. Yeah. I do have two friends that one's a firefighter and one's a farmer, and they both love their trucks because they use them for truck things.
Yeah.
But I think that was probably one of the problems. It's the pricing is still going to be an issue for a while. Eventually, the prices will come down. But for now, I mean, how many, especially in this environment, how many people can really spend $50,000 on a truck that's going to give you probably 180 miles on a charge?
Yeah, I mean, you saw my truck on this morning. I mean, it's a diesel, eco diesel, whatever that means. It gets more miles. It gets a good amount, but right. I completely fill that up. And it's almost 700 miles on a tank.
Yeah, you got a big tank.
It's a big tank for sure, and it's expensive to fill up for sure. But like, that's a big difference between 200 miles and then it's cold out and it's even less. Like that's just, it's a pain.
It's it's just kind of another, just like more evidence that the industry is still very new, and they're still trying to figure out these battery chemistries. So we do know that if it's not a super cold climate, and you're driving, I think the average is 41 miles per day for 70% of the country in terms of their daily commuting. It can work, and it does work. But then there's always, people are still going to have that range anxiety for a while. Well, yeah, I only drive 40 or 50 miles a day. Yes, my car is going to give me 200 miles on a charge. But what if I want to take a longer drive? Then they have to start considering public charging stations. It doesn't really happen that often. But that fear is not going to go away easily. And I get it. I understand it. So when I came down here, I have to drive 160 miles to get to the airport. So I live in the middle of fucking nowhere. And typically, I can drive my Tesla from my house to Albany without having to charge once, because it's 160 miles full. If I get a full charge, I'm like at 310 miles, so it's no problem. But it was 5 degrees when I came down here the other day, so it significantly affects the range of the car. So I did have to stop. I didn't have a full charge when I left, but I did have to stop and charge once on my way. So that took like about 25 minutes of my day, because I had to stop at the charging station, and I just went inside the Stewart station that had it.
Yeah, they want you to get some. They want you to buy some food. And
I had a cup of coffee. I wasn't really in a hurry, but it's not a big deal to me because, I wasn't in a hurry or anything.
Right.
And most EV owners know, like, you in those situations, you have to prepare for that. Is it a pain in the ass? A little bit, But if you're really passionate about the car and you like the car, and you know that 90% of the time you never have to worry about it, I think we tend to hear more people, the people that don't like the idea of EVs, I don't think they're really that concerned about range or the cold weather or stuff like that. They just don't like them.
Yeah.
And it's fine. I get it. I'm sure the same thing happened when the horse and buggies were gone. And people were like, I like my horse and buggy. I don't have to put gas in it. I just feed my horse and we go. Or, there are any number of reasons. It's just change takes time. And, if you consider all the people that live in cities or suburban areas where they really don't drive that much. My parents drive maybe 20 miles a day, if that, For them to have an electric car makes total sense.
Right. As long as they don't crash it.
Crashing. I mean, it's no different than any other car, really. And I mean, you have to worry about the fire thing. That's not as big of a deal as they try to make it out to be.
So if
more internal combustion vehicles catch on fire, by the way, than electric cars.
Well,
not by number. No.
By
by
ratio?
percentage.
Okay.
By percentage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if the transition takes place in the 50% or whatever, is the grid going to be able to handle a bunch of people? Because California, then when they were having issues, the governor was like, "Don't charge your electric vehicles,"
right.
Because you know what I mean. There's already grid. Texas was worried about going down with the cold snap and all this kind of stuff. If there's that much stuff on there, where's all this energy coming from, and how's that going to affect electricity rates and all that infrastructure?
Well, it's great for the electric companies because they make more money.
Of course.
So there's been a number of studies done on this showing the percentage of people that have EVs today, and considering how much electricity can be pulled from the grid at any given time. And for the most part, except in maybe, again, like a state like California, Texas, where there's some, I'd say, grid imperfections, that have to be fixed. But you also have to consider when people charge their cars as well. Most people charge their cars at night while they're sleeping. I don't think that's always figured into the equation when people are like, well, what happens, it's the middle of the day and I'm trying to charge my car. Well, the data show that most people don't charge a car in the middle of the day. I think the transportation.
Well, most electricity use isn't happening during the day unless it's,
Well, at night's the best time.
Right.
Because you have fewer people using it and it's also cheaper.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you have to keep up. Grid enhancements will have to be made, but they have to be made anyway. I don't. Again, I can just look at the data and extrapolate that it's at least right now, it's not going to be a big deal. Even at 50% of all new cars being sold by 2030 being electric, that's just new cars being sold. You still have all the other cars out there. So it's not like 50% of all cars are going to be electric. And again, I always look at the Bloomberg data showing 50% new cars by 2030, and I think by 2050 it was supposed to be something like 70%. So you still have a fair amount of time before there's ever a situation where it could be a big problem.
Yeah. But it seems like a good opportunity there because, I mean, we were just talking about that's just electric vehicles. All these other freaking crypto, AI, all this other electronic shit, like it all needs energy. And it's all got to, it's all got to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So that energy demand and electricity in general is gonna, it's not going away.
No, it's not, and it does beg the question, what will the energy mix look like in 50 years? Because we talk about that a lot.
Fusion.
You think so?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah, what is it going to be? I mean, we talked about this before about nuclear.
Right.
Is kind of the obvious choice, but there still seems to be, it takes a while. I mean, any of this stuff takes a while, but
here's the thing with nuclear. It shouldn't take a while.
Yeah.
Because it's been around for a long time.
Right.
And the bottom line is it's cost prohibitive to build and maintain. No, like a lot of people that love nuclear don't want to talk about that. They'll say, "Oh, well, the capacity factor is the best with nuclear, and it's clean, and all that is true." But it's so expensive to build and to maintain and to operate. And I know Keith Cole has written quite a bit about small modular reactors, which I think make total sense to me. It's kind of
because
like
these big, like gigantic things, it's like you said, the payoff is so long down the road. It's like these companies are like, I don't want to do it.
Well, I mean, the payoff is really only for those who can build it, and then they have to secure the subsidies, and they're so massive now that they can't. When the government says, "Nah, I don't have enough money," then you're like, you must really be charging a lot.
We're too busy fighting wars.
We can fund wars, no problem. But so I think SMRs could be a real solution for the nuclear industry. Could really kind of push it to another bull market situation. Coal's pretty much done. It's never going to grow. I mean, we had a short burst when thing in Ukraine happened. But that was short-lived. Poland, I think, was once one of the largest users of coal, and they're phasing out coal, and they're looking at nuclear. Interestingly, they put an order in, I think, for 5 small modular reactors, and I think they're going to be one of the first countries to really test on that level.
I know China is going hard on nuclear because they also even if people are scared of the whole thing, they're like, no, we're doing this. We need this energy. We don't really. They're not going to be worried about the Karens that they're not in my backyard crowd. They're just like, no, it's happening.
I don't think it's so much. The NIMBY is still there, but I think it's mostly the cost.
You think so?
So in China, it's everything's subsidized in China. So there's no one going to be like, hey, stop taking my tax dollars. Whereas here, I mean, there is a little bit of that still where we're just like, nah, we can't justify this. So globally, I think you'll have the traditional nuclear reactors in China or other places where there's more of a dictatorial government that they just do what they want. I think in the Western world, you'll see more SMRs, and they just make more sense financially and environmentally. So coal, not really going to go anywhere. Natural gas, I believe, is pretty much going to peak and just maintain that way for probably another 70 years.
Right.
And then really your growth is going to be in energy efficiency and conservation and renewables. I mean, that's where you continue to see the lion's share of growth. Solar grew dramatically last year, but it's still such a tiny percent of what we produce. So this is I've talked about this so many times. It's not about who already has the largest market share. It's who's taking the most market share at the most rapid rate. So I'm more interested in growth than I am in what's already in existence.
Right.
That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck.
Yeah, so you can invest in these small companies that are, they're only gaining small percentage of the mix, but from their perspective, these companies might have doubled or tripled or 10x their sales because because they're gaining that share. So
Right.
if you can get in early before that goes up, it's going to be huge. Switching gears real fast before we wrap up, we got to talk about weed, bro.
Weed.
So we've been talking about obviously weed 2017 was when it really, I mean, your subscribers in particular made a crap load on a bunch of marijuana stocks. And it kind of has gotten more mainstream. So the talk basically now in an election year is like, are they going to just legalize it? And is there an opportunity there, or like how should we be thinking about weed? Has the big money already been made?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been made. And so the rescheduling thing was essentially the DEA has to look at it now and just look at the data now and say, okay, are we going to reschedule cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 or Schedule 3? Schedule 1 is basically it serves no valuable purpose for society. So
Right.
Cannabis is Schedule 1, so is heroin.
Right, and I was talking to Bolden about this actually last time, and Muno, one of our social media guys, was like, he said that cocaine is Schedule 2.
Right.
So, and I guess Schedule 1 is the worst. So right now they have weed
Right.
as more dangerous than like cocaine and some of these like more traditional sort of like, I guess, white people drugs.
Right.
So the talk is maybe going from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3.
Right. So Schedule 3 would allow a lot more research to be done on cannabis, which is kind of stupid at this point. So much research has already been done.
Right.
It's just kind of dragging your
Well,
feet
you were
to
talking to me about it. I
legalization.
was like, hey, this is like the step for it all. If they can get it to 3, then it's more likely to then go from 3 to just be full-blown
descheduled. Right. Obviously, when you move something out of Schedule 1 in terms of getting funding, it becomes much, much easier. We've heard a little bit about the banking legislation, the idea that cannabis companies cannot deduct basic operational costs like any other company because of the scheduling status of it.
That's so silly because there's there are two different agencies there, right? The DEA is the one in charge of the scheduling,
right?
And then the other is what, the IRS. I mean,
so I think it was Homeland.
Homeland.
Not
Okay.
Homeland. It was HHS.
Okay.
They're the ones that put forth the recommendation to review.
Gotcha.
The scheduling process. Even at Schedule 3, though, technically it's still federally illegal. Even though the states have gone against the feds and said we're going to do this anyway. I think it makes most sense to just completely deschedule it, but they won't. They'll probably reschedule it to Schedule 3, and then after a few years they'll completely deschedule it. That's just the way the government works.
Right.
If they're actually going to do something positive, it's going to take forever to make it happen.
So you think the big money in weed's already sort of been made? I mean, it's hard to think otherwise when, I mean, what was the one that was up like 3,000% or something? Canopy. Yeah, it's just like, that it was a true like mania phase at that time. But it sounds like you're more bullish on the next thing, which is psychedelics,
right?
Mushrooms, I guess.
Yeah. So it's the similarity between the two is they're both federally illegal,
right?
But it's a little bit different in that, as opposed to the cannabis industry where they were trying to set up dispensaries and you could get medicinal or recreational, the psychedelic stuff is really all medicinal, and there's been just so many positive results from early clinical trials using various psychedelics for, anxiety, depression, addiction, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, obesity. I mean, so many different things.
Yeah, some of the early studies they've said are like mind-blowing on the effectiveness.
The smoking cessation one I always found really fascinating, which is
What's that? Quitting smoking?
quitting smoking, which is, I think it was 2008 when Johns Hopkins first started running these studies, and they've been able to replicate them over and over again. And the first time they did it using psilocybin with therapy, they had like an 80% success rate.
Yeah.
So an 80% success rate for any kind of addiction is unheard of.
Yeah, I mean, especially with, the drug issue that is going on in this country, overdosing, the fentanyl stuff. It just it doesn't seem to be stopped. Gambling too is legalized pretty much everywhere. You gamble anywhere. So there's a lot of addictions that, it's not just, smoking or whatever. There's tons out there that this could potentially help out.
Well, one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous actually promoted psychedelics as a potential way to treat alcoholism.
Really?
Yeah.
Recently, or
no, it was a long
time ago
before he died.
And you were saying you got some gummies.
I did. So here's the weird thing. So from an investment standpoint, I'm very interested in the companies that are in clinical trials right now. Yeah. They're really biotech companies.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not like you think like a weed company or like something. You'd be like, okay, I want to invest in the people that are growing this and selling this. But that's not really the case with
this is all.
They're not like a bunch of mushroom farmers.
No. And a lot of it that they're doing is just, they're analogs. They're not even real mushrooms. They're just creating analogs of those molecules.
Right.
So they're going to have so there's a and I think Alex talked about this too, using MDMA to treat PTSD for veterans. So that went through phase 3 clinical trials last year and proved successful. So we suspect that this year the FDA will actually approve this particular MDMA therapy, and it will be legal and it will be approved and people can start using it. The interesting thing was the American Medical Association put out what's called a CPT code, which essentially is a code that is given so that insurance companies can cover the cost of a particular medication. They announced that they were gonna that they approved the CPT codes like right after those phase 3 clinical trials proved successful. So that tells me that the FDA is going to put this out on the market probably by the end of the year.
But is that still Schedule 1? Like, do they have to reschedule it in order for that to happen, or is that?
So because it has to be prescribed.
Right.
You can't just go to a dispensary. It has to be prescribed by a doctor.
Gotcha.
So it's a little different. There are a number of companies that are in, phase 1, phase 2, even phase 3 clinical trials now. And those are the ones from an investment point of view, I like, because even at phase 2, so if you have a company that gets through phase 2 clinical trials and those trials prove successful, they don't even have to go to phase 3 because a bigger pharma company can come and just buy it, either buy the company or buy the IP. Either way, if you own shares of that company, and a big pharma company comes along and buys it, say Pfizer comes along and buys it, well,
yeah,
they're
that's
going to buy
when
it at a premium, and you're going to get
that's
cash.
when you see these overnight gains of hundreds, sometimes thousands % when it comes in, and that can pretty much happen at any time.
Right.
It's not like, oh, their drug trials about to release here. Like, they kind of maybe get the word out there that like, hey, it's looking good. And then so it's on top of that, you get the buyout, but then it's like it's validation that Pfizer or whatever these big guys isn't going to buy them if they didn't have something. Like, I'm sure they're not just buying it on a whim. They kind of are doing the research and being like, okay, we've looked at the early stuff and we think there's something here.
They're following all of that. I don't typically, well, I have in the past, but these days I won't really. I don't want to say I won't, but usually I won't buy a psychedelic stock if that company is not in at least phase 2 clinical trials.
Okay.
If they made it to phase 2, then it's okay. If they made it to phase 2, then there's an opportunity here for an exit. Phase 1, it's very unlikely anyone's gonna buy IP or buy the company at phase 1 unless it's really cheap, which has happened a couple of times. But for the most part, I like to see them at least in phase 2, but before we start investing, because again, there's an opportunity there. You don't have to wait till phase 3 or wait for the medicine to get on the market, which could be even after those trials, could be another 5 years. FDA has fast tracked a lot of that stuff, which is also helpful. But getting back to the mushrooms the psilocybin I got were gummies. This is not medicinal at all. And it's fascinating to me because right now there are companies that are online selling. You can buy psilocybin gummies online. Use your credit card, buy or Bitcoin if you want, and buy
your CBDC
and buy CBDC and buy your psilocybin gummies. So I got some, and I took them a couple weeks ago when I was in Arizona. I was in Sedona. I was like, what a great place to take mushrooms.
Sure, yeah.
But I've done mushrooms plenty of times, and I love them, and I don't do them all the time, but maybe once or twice a year I'll do them. But I've never done an actual gummy. It's usually just have the mushrooms. Yeah. So I didn't really know, are these like cannabis edibles, or is one going to be too much? I don't know. So I just did a small amount.
You didn't eat the whole bag?
No. I ate a small amount, so I didn't have any visuals or hallucinations or anything like that. But they were quite nice. I mean, it definitely put me in a really great mood, and it very relaxing state of mind. I was actually really impressed with them, and I have more, and I'm probably gonna, I don't know, maybe in a few months go camping and take more to see, if I see any visuals the next time. I'll just probably like triple the amount that I take.
Interesting.
Yeah, but there's like maybe 5 companies I've seen so far that are selling these things online.
Okay.
I mean, technically it's illegal, but I don't know, maybe because they're set up to be microdoses, so there's such a small amount.
Right, I was going to say it's a small amount, so
maybe that's how they're...
Well, after this is released, they're going to get shut down.
Well, I just wonder too, when you think about all the things that the government is trying to deal with right now, whether it's war or infrastructure, how much time are they really going to put towards trying to shut down a company that's selling?
Well, yeah, and you look at the criminalization thing that has happened with weed. It's like that's the first step too. Is like the ambivalence towards it, and then but in order to like really scale up, then you need to kind of jump through all the hoops of doing what you need to do.
Yeah, I don't know how much money they could possibly be making doing that, because I don't think they were too expensive. I mean, the cost of mushrooms has quadrupled in the past couple of years, but it's still pretty cheap. And if you're just making microdoses, it doesn't seem like it's going to be that expensive to make these things. So the margins would probably be pretty good, but in volume, I just don't know how much they could possibly make.
Yeah, it definitely isn't mainstream the way you might consider marijuana is these days. So
right.
All right. Well, this has been a great conversation, Jeff.
What do we discuss? EVs, CBDC.
We'll put it in the table of contents.
How messed up the government is, and mushrooms.
Yes, it's a great one. So remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Particularly comment. We love the comments.
Even if
Jeff,
they're rude.
Yeah, Jeff loves when you just do troll comments.
Tell me how much EVs suck. And
yeah, he loves
weed
those
is
comments.
Ruining the world.
Yeah.
I love those. This is my favorite.
And we'll see you next time. Thanks.